and begged the corsair to give them absolution in articulo mortiso, which means at the point of death. Give them absolution at the point of death. The Moors presently stripped us as naked as monkeys. My mother, my maids of honor, and myself were all treated in the same manner. It is amazing how quick these gentry are at undressing people. But what surprised me most was that they thrust their fingers into every part of our bodies that their fingers could in any way reach. I thought it was a very strange kind of ceremony, for that is how we are generally apt to judge of things when we have not seen the world. I learnt afterwards that it was to discover if we had diamonds concealed. This practice has been long-standing among those civilized nations that scour the seas. I was informed that the religious knight of Malta never fail to make this search whenever any Moors of either sex fall into their hands. It is one of those international laws from which they never deviate. Doing body cavity searches. I need not tell you how great a hardship it was for a young princess and her mother to be made slaves and carried to Morocco. You may easily imagine that we must have suffered on board the pirate ship. My mother was still extremely handsome. Our maids of honor, and even our common waiting women, had more charms than were to be found in all Africa. As to myself, I was enchanting. I was beauty itself, and then I had my innocence. But alas, I did not retain it long. This precious flower, which was reserved for the lovely Prince of Massa Carrara, was plucked by the captain of the Moorish vessel. So her virginity was taken, she was ravaged by him, who was a hideous Negro, and thought he did me infinite honor. Indeed, both the Princess of Palestrina and myself must have been very strong to undergo all the hardships and violences we suffered till our arrival at Morocco. But I will not detain you any longer with such common things. They are hardly worth mentioning. Upon our arrival at Morocco, we found that kingdom bathed in blood. 50 sons of the Emperor Mouli Ismail, which was the Sultan of Morocco who lived from 1646 to 1727 and reigned for 50 years. Civil war and bloody strife followed his death. So 50 sons of the Emperor Mouli Ismail were each at the head of a party. This produced 50 civil wars of blacks against blacks, browns against browns, and of mulattoes against mulattoes. In short, the whole empire was one continued scene of carcasses. No sooner were we landed than a party of blacks, of a faction hostile to my captain, came to rob him of his booty. After the money and jewels, we were the most valuable things he had. I was witness on this occasion to such a battle as you never see in your cold European climates. The northern nations do not have the hot blood, nor that raging lust for women that is so common in Africa. The natives of Europe seem to have their veins filled with milk only, but fire and vitriol circulate in those of the inhabitants of Mount Atlas and the neighboring provinces. They fought with the fury of the lions, the tigers and serpents of their country, to decide who should have us. A Moor seized my mother by the right arm, while my captain's lieutenant held her by the left. Another Moor laid hold of her by the right leg, and one of our corsairs held her by the other. In this manner were almost every one of our women dragged between 4 soldiers. My captain kept me concealed behind him, and with his scimitar cut down everyone who opposed him. At length I saw all our Italian women and my mother mangled and torn to pieces by the monsters who were fighting over them. The captives, my companions, the Moors who took us, the soldiers, the sailors, the blacks, the whites, the mulattoes, and lastly my captain himself, were all slain, and I remained alone, half dead, upon a heap of dead bodies. Similar barbarous scenes were occurring every day over the whole country, which is an extent of 300 leagues, and yet they never missed the 5 stated times of prayer decreed by their prophet Mohammed. So, bloody, vicious, violent as it all was, 5 times a day they did pray. I untangled myself with great difficulty from this vast heap of slaughtered bodies, and crawled to a large orange tree that stood on the bank of a neighboring rivulet, where I fell down exhausted with fatigue, and overwhelmed with horror, despair, and hunger, my senses being overpowered. I fell asleep, or rather seemed to be in a trance. Thus I lay in a state of weakness and insensibility, between life and death, when I felt myself touched by something that moved up and down upon my body. This brought me to myself. I opened my eyes and saw an attractive, fair-faced man, who sighed, and muttered these words between his teeth: "O che scigiara di essere senza coglioni," which is Italian, "Oh, what a misfortune to be without balls." The man who utters these words is a castrato, a singer, emasculated as a boy to preserve the soprano or contralto range of his voice. So she looks up and sees a castrated singer. Aha! To chapter 12, The Adventures of the Old Woman, continued. Astonished and delighted to hear my native language, and no less surprised at the young man's words, I told him that there were far greater misfortunes in the world than what he complained of. And to convince him of it, I gave him a short history of the horrible disasters that had happened to me. And so, as soon as I had finished, I fainted again. He carried me in his arms to a neighboring cottage, where he had me put to bed, gave me something to eat, and waited on me with the greatest of attention. Here I find 2 sentences we skip. "I was born at Naples," he said, "where they castrate 2,000 or 3,000 children every year. Several die of the operation." You know what they castrate them for. "And others are sent to govern states and empires." This is an allusion to the famous Italian castrato Carlo Broschi, SCHI, known as Farinelli, 1705-1782. So Farinelli apparently was castrated and then went off and became a king. My operation was a great success, and I was one of the singers in the Princess Palestrina's chapel. "In my mother's chapel!" I exclaimed. "The Princess of Palestrina, your mother," cried he, bursting into a flood of tears. "You must be the beautiful young princess whom I raised till she was 6 years old, and who at that tender age promised to be as fair as you are now." "I am the same," I replied. "My mother lies about 100 yards from here, cut in pieces, and buried under a heap of dead bodies." It's kind of, we got this reuniting after years and happy and joy, and we'll end that paragraph with that sentence, huh? Then I related to him all that had happened to me, and he in return acquainted me with all his adventures, and now he had been sent to the court of the King of Morocco by a Christian prince, to conclude a treaty with that monarch, the result of which granted him gunpowder, cannon, and ship, that enabled him to destroy the commerce of other Christian governments. Yay! "My mission is concluded," said the eunuch. "I am going to take ship at Ceuta, C-E-U-T-A, and I'll take you along with me to Italy." Now here's an Italian sentence. If someone knows Italian, try it. "Ma c'è sciagura di essere senza coglioni." Yep, try that. I thanked him with tears of joy, and instead of taking me with him to Italy, he carried me into Algiers and sold me to the Dey of that province, D-E-Y. I had not been long a slave when a plague, which had made the tour of Africa, Asia, and Europe, broke out at Algiers with redoubled fury. "You have seen an earthquake, but tell me, miss, have you ever the plague?" "Never," answered the young baroness. "If you ever had," continued the old woman, "you would admit that an earthquake was a trifle compared to it. It is very common in Africa, plague that is. I was seized with it. Imagine, if you will, the distressed situation of the daughter of a pope, who should be blessed, only 15 years old, and who in less than 3 months had felt the miseries of poverty and slavery, had been ravished almost every day, beheld her mother cut into 4 quarters, experienced the scourges of famine and war, and now dying of the plague at Algiers. I did not, however, die of it. Obviously, she's here to tell the story. But my eunuch and the Dey, and almost the whole seraglio of Algiers perished. As soon as the first fury of this dreadful pestilence was over, a sale was made of the Dey's slaves. I was purchased by a merchant, who carried me to Tunis. This man sold me to another merchant,